ning gabi. Ani ana pud ta karon sa atong regular fourth Wednesday of the month nga programming karong gabi una ang Cebu Lady Lawyers Association nga programa nga Partners in Law. Ako di ay ang inyong regular anchor si Attorney Irene Ann Caballas, both of Celia and the Legal Alternatives for Women Center Inc. Tonight is May 24, 2023, and I'm very excited because it will be the first time that Partners in Law will be having with us as our guests, and also there's my fellow co-anchor from the Legal Alternatives for Women will also be a guest, as well as a co-anchor, and our guests will actually be having their part of their continuing legal education program activity here. In short, naa sila'y not just online but on screen nga pusil sa ilahang law class. Our topic for this evening will be very interesting, and they have researched this topic very, very well. They are very thoroughly oriented to this law. It is the Safe Spaces Act, or more commonly known as the Bawal Bastos Law. But before that, let me introduce to you my co-anchor and fellow law anchor, Miss June Laville Quinianola, or we call her Laville.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Attorney.
June is also connected with the Legal Alternatives for Women Center Inc. She is part of the legal office of Law Inc. And joining us tonight also are our guests na law student practitioners all the way from the University of San Carlos, of which I'm also an alumna sa Bachelor of Science in Marine Biology. Oh. Palihat ta, Caroline yan, pero sirena lang ko. Future abogada lang mo. Anyways, kuyog nato karon sila Mary Glee Angeli Delicano.
Good evening, Attorney. Good evening, everyone.
And also future attorney Farah Stephanie Reyes.
Good evening, Attorney. Good evening, everyone.
Before we proceed to our very interesting topic nga kana RA 11313 or the Safe Spaces Act, I would just like to ask, kinsa inyong professor sa practice court?
Our professor attorney is Executive Judge Marlon Maneva.
Uy, judge. Dako na ni nga credits, judge, sa ilahang continuing legal education program. Kay not only are they complying with the requisites of your class, they're doing it really online and also broadcast on national and international cable TV nonetheless. Tell us something about the continuing legal education program. Is it only for your school or is it for all the law schools in the Philippines?
The CLEP attorney is for all law schools in the Philippines because this is now a requirement for you to be able to take the bar. So in San Carlos, we are deployed to different agencies. Like us, we're deployed to Law Inc. Just recently, we had a meeting with EJ Muneva, and he asked us about our experiences with our different agencies.
Oh, okay. Naapa di ay additional experience. So if this is for all the law schools, we invite also the other law schools in Cebu. Maybe you would like your LSPs to guest in our TV show Partners in Law. Kay sa tinuod lang, kung kaya nato nga magpa-TV, kaya nato mo adto sa korte, o di ba? O mga isog-isog, mga isog-isog. Okay, let's go now to our topic, RA 11313 or the Safe Spaces Act. Just as a brief overview, Ms. Laville, what is RA 11313 all about?
This law is this is not an amendment, or this does not repeal the relatively earlier law, which is sexual harassment law, because this law safeguards the protection of women even in public spaces. Because in sexual harassment law, it only caters to harassment in the workplace, in the training, and educational institutions. But in this law, this does not only cover harassment in public spaces, but even online or in cyberspace.
In other words, RA 11313 expands
Yes.
the sexual harassment law. While it modifies, it doesn't totally repeal everything because gidungagan na. Miss Glee. Glee, right?
Yes, a
Glee,
bit,
like
yes.
Glee Club. Miss Glee. Why was there a need to enact an expanded law? What was the reasoning of our lawmakers when they decided to have or enact this Safe Spaces Act?
Our lawmakers recognize, attorney, that the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act was not enough to cater to the harassment that people are facing, especially not just in the workplace, but on a broader scale. Now that especially now nga, in the 1990s, online sexual harassment wasn't even there to speak of. Pila ramang kabuk na sa internet back then. But now there was a need because people now had easier access to each other, and with that access came the greater dangers of women, the LGBTQIA community, and vulnerable sectors being exposed to these. And additionally, it also recognizes na moral ascendancy was not just the only requisite for you to feel harassment.
So,
Yes,
ning koan, ning lapad ang paningin sa ato ang lawmakers. Okay, gipalapdan. What are the, shall we say, substantive na innovations aning Safe Spaces Act when it comes to women participation in the law? Can anybody discuss on that? For instance, in the formation of the CODI.
There's one, attorney, because now the CODI has to be headed by a woman, and there's even a quota that there has to be more women inside the CODI for the workplaces. So,
Okay, so this law does not only protect women, it empowers them.
Yes,
Recognizing the role of women in nation building. Wow, nice, no? Sometimes we hear this all the time, women in nation building, but we don't immediately see how this can be formed into a reality until we see the laws that are being set in place. Okay, we were talking that the Safe Spaces Act actually expands the sexual harassment law. What is the nature of sexual harassment, and under the new law, where can it be applied? Miss Farah?
Sexual harassment, attorney, it can be applied to in the Safe Spaces Act. It can now be applied to let's say acts which are committed beyond the workplace. It can be done even when you're just walking along the streets by random people, because in the Sexual Harassment Act, diba, there was moral ascendancy as a requirement for you to be able to file a case for sexual harassment. Now it can be committed by anyone, anywhere.
Okay, so it's not limited only to certain environments. As a comparison, in the old Sexual Harassment Act, in which places or environments can sexual harassment become committed?
In workplaces, attorney, in educational institutions.
Also
in
in
training
environments. So actually, when you're under LSP CLEP in Law Inc., we have to be very sure we do not harass you. But we can harass you, but not sexually. We can harass you with guesting in TV, but it's not sexual harassment.
Not gender-based.
It's not gender-based. Okay, I like that term because
Not gender-based.
Miss Glee introduced the term gender-based. So what is the nature of sexual harassment? So what's the nature? Anybody? Laville?
It's gender-based sexual harassment. It means that you are being harassed by nature, by reason of your gender, gender identity, or gender expression. So when you're walking on the street, if you're a member of the LGBTQIA community and you're being catcalled, that's a manifestation of like this is the very reason why this law was enacted.
Okay, so sexual harassment differs from other forms of harassment in that it has to be gender-based or on the basis of sex. Okay, now I like the fact that you introduced another term, Attorney Laville, catcalling. Unsa man ning catcalling? Ay, iring nga nanawag ug laing iring. What are the forms of catcalling? Anybody would like to answer?
An example, attorney, is kana bitong murag ato ang kanang pinaka-common dyan is kanang wolf whistling, like the
Tweet to you.
With tweet to you.
or di ko kibawa na.
that's one example of catcalling.
Or it could also be other forms of derogatory remarks, I suppose. Like, Shagita, an example with me, bayot. Or mga jeers, it could be. In other words, binisaya pa for our Bisaya speaking audience, bugal. But in essence, when do we say that? Because there could actually be a blurring of the lines between what constitutes harassment and what might be freedom of expression. So where do we draw the line? When can we say that it is harassment? What are the qualifications?
I guess we draw the line, attorney, in terms of consent. So it is harassment when it's unwanted, when it's unsolicited, when it's something that you never asked for to begin with. Kung naglakaw ra ka sa daan, dayon kanay mo kalit ni mo nga, Miss, gay kog number B. That's something that you never wanted to because you just wanted to go from one destination to another. But here you are paying the tax just for being a woman.
Okay, kana pud, because it is unwanted, uninvited, unsolicited, I suppose there has to be a form of expression of rejection. I don't want this. Okay. Usahay biya po kung pananglitan si Piolo Pascual. Moy mo na, hi miss. I'd like to introduce myself to you. I'm Piolo. Basi kita po bimingon. Tamaras. Hi. Can I have your number? Basi okay ra pud nato, di ba? So when do we say nga kanang wa jud ni sa imong plano nga manghatag og number, wa po kakauyon nga kanang gi samok-samok ka. I guess it would have to be, there has to be a form of an overt expression of rejection. What could it be?
I would like to add, attorney, na I think if it incites fear or if the woman or a member of the LGBTQIA community feels threatened because of that
Or intruded on?
Yes, because of that remark, then I think it would constitute as catcalling. And also, I think the law is, I think it's mala prohibita, so intent is not material here.
It's the effect that the mere effect na somebody feels harassed. But for that effect to be made obvious, there has to be also signs. Like for example, the woman you are asking a number for ignores you and tries to walk faster. You don't get to go and pursue after her and assume, I thought she didn't hear me. Maybe she really did like to give me her number. You don't do that, because then there's really a sign that she's not willing to engage in conversation with you, and then you keep repeatedly asking for her personal info, asking for her number, making these comments nga unprovoked, unwanted, and invited. So that's the essence of sexual harassment, and that is where we draw the line at simple, what differentiates simple expression, freedom of expression, and what constitutes already harassment. So, dali ara, our first 15-minute segment is up. So now, please bear with us as we hear from our friends for their messages. We will be right back. See you soon. And we are back. Okay, we say that there are new situations or environment where sexual harassment can occur, and one of them is public spaces and in the streets. What constitutes streets and public spaces? Because we, as ordinary laymen, we know that streets are roads, but when we say public spaces, we think it's places that are open for the general public. But laws, specifically penal laws in the Philippines, mga criminal laws in the Philippines, are very specific as to definition. So I want to ask our law student practitioners sa inyong pagbasa-basa o pag-research thoroughly for one night, unsa na ang public spaces, unsa na ang streets.
So for public spaces, attorney, this may include hotels, this may include public convention centers, this may include malls or other places that are not other places. So in the Safe Spaces Act, the only place that is not included, or the only place that you can say that you are safe in, is your home. So everything else that's considered a public space where sexual harassment can be committed.
Occur. Okay. So when we say streets, we don't just mean the
Sidewalks.
road itself. We include sidewalks. We include even the jeepney stops, I suppose.
Yes, I
No, jeepney stops, or the bus terminals. We include. How about Plaza Independencia? Is that included?
Yes.
It is included. So even in public parks, plazas, and what about what if the hotel is privately owned or the restaurant is privately owned? Is that still included?
Yes, attorney.
attorney.
It's not the ownership, but the fact that it's a public place.
Yes,
Meaning to
because-
say it's available to
The public.
the general public.
Yes.
So the general public is being catered to. So it even the very high-end resorts, where only maybe 1% of the public has access to, simply because only 1% of us can afford. But it's still a public place because it is open to anyone who can afford. Hala, pwede na Judy. What about if guest in a hotel, and then they make advances to front desk workers, or the people who in the concierge area where they are being catered to? Can the employee validly file a complaint against a overly rude or forward guest who's making sexual innuendos to her? Pwede.
Yes,
Yes,
attorney,
attorney.
because
Dili customer is always right.
no.
Or guest is always
That's
right.
right.
Okay.
It's not a attorney. It's not a valid. It's not a ticket for you to sexually harass the workers or the employees in a hotel, even if you're the guest. You can't just claim that you have the right because customers are always right. It's not. It will not apply in this case because this law specifically mentions that unlike the other law, the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act, it's not the requirement of moral ascendancy, that the superior must sexually harass the inferior for that law to apply, because in this case, even like people of equal levels, like your peers or your co-employees, fellow like your colleagues can commit this commit this the acts under this law because it's often tagged as the reversed sexual harassment because like even an inferior can commit this act against a superior.
I'm glad you mentioned that because in this law, even the superiors or the bosses or the supervisors are entitled to feel safe in their own work environment.
Yes, attorney.
That's a very good point, Miss Laville. Judge Maneva, I hope you are listening. Your students are slaying this Q&A portion. Okay, now, is there a requirement for these public spaces or for these private establishments which cater to the general public? Is there a requirement for them to somehow publish or make known that their area is a safe zone? There is.
There can be attorney like they can post like no there must be no sexual harassment in this workplace. This is a safe place. There can be like
A
small
poster.
posters.
And I believe that even some establishments already have this poster as well as the number of the nearest police office. This is a safe space, and then no catcalling, jeering, no disrespectful remarks, no whistling, etc. Now let's go to another expanded area of sexual harassment, which I believe is one of special concern simply because it's not a physical space. It is actually a cyber space. Online sexual harassment. What constitutes online sexual harassment? Anybody? Miss Glee?
Online sexual harassment, it can go from in a multitude of ways, attorney. What is committed here, like physically, can be committed online. Like you are, for example, something common online is kanang mag-send og unwanted pictures, or basically someone nga no matter how many times you block them, they just constantly add you and keep sending you unwanted messages, and that is already online sexual harassment, attorney. The difference with, for example, mana sila, what if kanang libelous siya nga statement? The difference with libelous statement if it is online is that kung libel kay kailangan man ay publication, so ibutang nato, gibutang niya sa imong Facebook wall nga kanang kuan nga kanang example gitawag og prostitute ang girl. And then that's something sa cyber libel. But if you're being called that only in a private message, you can seek solace under the Safe
Because
Spaces
there can really be virtual strangers who somehow found access to your online social media accounts or emails, and then they send you messages that even if you would say it won't hurt me physically because you're not close, I don't even know where you are, but it would still threaten you, especially if it's too familiar, and especially if they take a there's a private picture of you. It's only kept in your cell phone, but somehow they were able to hack your cloud and then download that photo and then send it to you. So it sends a message that they have intruded in your personal cyber space. So that's included in online sexual harassment. When we say online, what is online? What is online? Before, you could send blackmail notes, poison letters. So you'd have to put it in a letter, and then you put it in somebody's locker, put it in, right? And then I think even now that might, except that there's already the online sexual harassment law, but before it used to be just unjust vexation. Or if there's blackmail, it could be coercion. It could be a form of coercion. But now, when we say online, what is online?
It is when it is committed in the internet, attorney, and social media. It's for people to understand, basically online means internet. So it is committed through the use of internet.
What about if it is another electronic form of communication using phone lines, but it is not internet? Like for example, our SMS, text messages, is it also still included in online sexual harassment?
Yes.
Yes,
It is,
yes, it is because it's a form of electronic digital communication. So okay, online is any communication na electronic. So dili face to face, dili pod written, dili pod snail mail or postal service. So emails are online.
Phone messages.
Phone messages, mobile phone messages are online. So with anything internet based. Okay. Another term that keeps popping up when we talk about the Safe Spaces Act, stalking. Okay. Somebody discuss what's the difference between stalking and assuming. Naadyo ko an-ana kay what if ba nga nagdahom ra jud ka nga gisunod-sunod ka niya. The reason you keep seeing each other is because you after all work in neighboring buildings. Yung nag-assume na you ka like, you had an ex-boyfriend nga the breakup didn't go well and then imo siyang kanang reject. For a while, he was crying, and then after a while, wala na siya crying. Then the next thing you know, why do I keep seeing him in the same karinderya I eat in? And then sometimes magdungan mi og atang og same jeepney sa jeepney stop. Nag-stalk yun ni siya. Nako. Pero when is it stalking and when is it assuming? Miss Laville?
I think one of the distinctions kay dili ra siya coincidence nga nagkadungan mo kay murag naagi murag intention ang stalker to establish a kanang murag connection bitaw to harass or like not inflict physical harm necessarily but murag na threaten ang babay when it, or ang any member of the LGBTQIA community na she does not feel safe when that person is constantly stalking her because mura siya sa law man good kay it provides na like there's like psychological trauma or na ay murag kanang murag ma-threaten gyud ang babay nga murag
In such a way that she doesn't feel safe. But the essence of stalking is presence, visual presence. It could be online presence, which is intrusive. Oh, naka ko ana. So, usahay sad, it pays po to ask, why are you always following me? No, dili tang assume kay basig assuming di ay wa ko gasunod-sunod nimo. Uy, pare tag jeepney stop kay pare duol man ato ang building. Duol man ang atong syempre we eat at the same carinderia during lunch. Lunch break kay tungod 1 hour ba ya nang lakaw pag siya layo kay nga lugar. So but I'm not really following you kana yung intentional intrusion nga deliberate presence in such a way that would make the woman feel threatened. So there must be something else like tan-awon jud ka. Kay if ever magtan-awon patan mo look away niya murag naaray ka storya lain taw. So di pa sa takaingon no nga stalk na ka kay ikay nakakita. Wa gani ka kakita nga kakita siya nimo. So basin og dili to stalking, basig assuming na kay ka. Oo. So Ana, if there is stalking in public spaces, is there also stalking online?
Yes, attorney.
Can you give an example of what is stalking online?
For example, attorney, in your Facebook account, somebody keeps on adding you. Like an example given by Gli Ganina. Like even if you remove him from your friends list, he keeps on kanang adding you on Facebook. For example, in let's say in your Viber account, let's say you gave your number to a person because that person needed you, and then you responded via text message, but later on he really ka nang nihanap jud siya ways to find you in your social media, for example like in your Viber. Wala na ka ni reply niya on text messages, but he keeps on popping up sa imong Viber account.
Viber, Insta,
Yes, Instagram.
Facebook, Twitter, no, but
WhatsApp.
again, WhatsApp, and then, pero we don't necessarily immediately say nga basin og kanang nag-stalk na nina ko siya just because he keeps popping up there kay basig he's also promoting a business. It could be public nga na siya public profile nga gusto or he may be running for public office nga he's trying to get as many many people within his sphere to notice him. In the essence of online stalking is targeted. Targeted jud siya nga ikaw dapat makapansin niya. So gisamuka na ka kay musend na og mga private messages that are too overly familiar.
Like for example, attorney nang kana, oh, I just saw you kanang nauli sa inyong balay. So
Kuyaw na kayo na.
that's all.
Abi na akong taga Manila ni nga nakita man siya nga nauli sa inyong balay. Musend pag yun og
Mga
feed from
pictures.
your CCTV hala ka diha gihak ang imuhang CCTV. That would really make a woman feel stalked.
Unsafe.
Kuya, we need to pause for a break na po di ay. So, let's hear from our sponsors and our friends. We'll be back.
And we're back. So earlier we talked about online or cyberspace sexual harassment. Now we are going to talk more relevant. It's more relevant and it's very interesting because we are going to distinguish what constitutes cyber libel vis-a-vis online sexual harassment.
Okay. So, cyber libel and online sexual harassment. There are many places where these concepts could cross-cut. Na siya mga cross-cutting concerns. But they are also actually distinct from each other. However, one single act may constitute both offenses, di ba? However, some acts may also just constitute one or the other. Let's distinguish cyber libel from online sexual harassment. Who wants to go deep into this?
So-
Deeper.
So, attorney, online sexual harassment and cyber libel, the same thing about them both is that they can be committed online. However, the differences in like the online attack that you post online, let's say for cyber libel, it can be any libelous statement. However, if you add some kanang gender on the libelous statement, then it can be a form of online sexual harassment.
Okay. So if I say, for example, me, I am a person who has a gripe with another person, and then I see this person I have a grudge with, naapa man ni siya utang nako. Ya, tuara nagpost ra nga nag-vacation sa Boracay. Nya ako din ako'y nagbayad sa iyang kanang utang kay ako ang cheque iyang gigamit. Makapungot biya sa jud no. Pero of course, di jud na pwede that we will post on
online.
social media.
Angry.
Hoy, bayhana ka. Gamit ka word nga bayhana ka. Wa uroy ka mauwaw. Nakautang ka nako nya sige kag post dinha sa Boracay. Even if nagamit siya og word nga bayhana ka. Is that online sexual harassment or could that just be cyber libel? So what do you think?
It's just cyber libel, attorney. It's not online sexual harassment.
Because anybody could be a chronic debtor,
Yes,
not just
attorney. It's not gender-based.
That's
It's
not
not
gender-based.
specific to any
The calling
gender.
her out as bayhana ka is just an expression of, "Huy, babae, hey lady,
Yeah.
you lady, pay your debt," something like that, right? However, you did not even mention her gender, and then you posted on your wall, shared it with other friends, and other people shared it. Panjud, this person, you can name them or not necessarily name them, but make sure that they are identified, no? So as to really give a pinpoint on their identity. And then you called them, you don't call them bayhana, but you call them prostitute, or in the vernacular, the words burikat. You call them prostitute, or without calling them names, you say that you break marriages. Uyab ka sa tanang mga dirty old man aning lugara. Sige ka og pamungkag og pamilya. She didn't even mention nga babae ka. And yet, would that constitute cyber libel, online sexual harassment, or both?
Now, attorney, it's both. Kay imuha, dili naman lang siya about a crime, vice, defect. Now you're crossing into the sphere of homophobic, misogynistic slurs, and you're perpetuating gender stereotypes.
So by this time, your humiliating remarks are already going into the realm of gender-based violence. If she weren't a woman whom you think is a home wrecker, you wouldn't have posted it.
You would have called
Unlike the other one where you just stated na palautang ka. Oh, anybody can be palautang. Oh, but only women can be other women or the mistress. So very distinct nga kanang move from just cyber libel to both cyber libel and online sexual harassment. Are there any instances of online sexual harassment which might not be cyber libel? Naa?
Yes, attorney, when it's privately sent, kay ibutang nato nga sa cyber libel, it requires publication. That
Publicity.
yes, attorney, that someone else can see it. But with online sexual harassment, it can be a private message. Kanang gi-DM lang, and then it's something that
Na-shock na ka nga, hala, gipicturan ko sa CCTV nga, nag-sunbathing ko sa ako ang yard.
Oy.
Yeah. Na I message dayon, how I love the look of the sun on your skin. Yee, di ba? O kita nga mga babae na, ano man ni? Oh, creepy. And send as a private message sa imuhang chat by somebody, wa gani sa imuhang friends list, na alay message request. That can already be online sexual harassment. Going back to cyber libel, Pinoy ra ba very social? Sobraan ka social na social media na yun. Hinuan. So social on social media. Makakita ganitag something,
Post.
click,
Share.
click link, send in kanang group chats. Or di ba? Share. Share the post. If it's a humiliating post posted on a wall, not available to the general public, but at least available to the friends of the poster, and then shared. What is the liability of those that share? Napadayon sila, na-perpetrate sila sa kanang post just for halageng, tanawa ang ganap, marites kaayo. So, what's the implication of that? What's the liability not just of the originator but also of the sharer?
It will depend now, attorney. Actually, na-foreseen na siya sa Supreme Court nga possibility na it was in the Dicini case. They said na it will depend kung inig-share nimo, ikaw ra man ka ni-click og share, imo ra gyud kuan ang original nga post. There's nothing that you said, nothing libelous. Ni-like ra ka didto. So no liability on your part. But when you add something tinuod bitaw burikat na siya. That is different. You now
Or ning po sa tanawag yang sultana agoy ginagod ko, or dili ba si kanang in your position as somebody prominent in society, manggawas ra yung baho gang o ning apil pa. Kadto mura na pug ka og another libel, another author. So careful ta anang share Pwede siguro click link, send to GC,
chat.
information dissemination, wala pa libel. But again, even though it might not be cyber libel, the fact that there's, especially if the original post had photos that were not intended for publication by the targeted person, not intended for sharing to the general public by publication, and then you just grab this from some common GC or from some photo dump or cloud account that you had access to, and then somebody also shared it. Basin og online sexual harassment, because the sharing of photos and videos without the consent of the owner might constitute online sexual harassment in certain contexts. So kana angay na hinumduman hala murag prescriptive periods na ta kay pasig ma out of time na po prescription. You know, we already tackled the new sexual harassment in public spaces, online sexual harassment. We mentioned na in work training and education environment, there are significant changes because sexual harassment can be peer to peer. It also includes not just harassment na face to face, but harassment that could be done by the work within the work network, which the work network could be a private network na kanang private internet account gihapon or work accounts. So that could also fall under there, as well as even private work accounts could still constitute online because it's online within that work network. No, so we said it's not only superior to inferior, it could be peer-to-peer, and it could be subordinate to the superior. One further thing. In the old law, there was a mention of a committee on investigation and decorum. Committee on decorum and investigation, or the CODI. What are the specific innovations added to this in the new law?
As earlier mentioned, attorney, it has to now be headed by a woman, and then that they have to investigate within a certain number of days. In fact, attorney, there was a recent case, I think it was LBC versus Palco, where the court ruled that when you fail to investigate a sexual harassment claim within in the most immediate time, and then the employee feels compelled to resign. As a result of that, you can be considered to have committed constructive dismissal.
Yes, imagine, because even in the old law, insofar as civil liability is concerned, solidary ang liability sa employers if they do not act on cases for sexual harassment, even if it's the supervisor who did it and not really the president of the company. But if the president turns a blind eye, doesn't immediately investigate, should the supervisor, the erring supervisor, be found guilty, and then he cannot pay the civil liability, it will be the employer who will be also liable for damages. The same solidary liability is present in the new law, including the imperative to investigate within 10 days. And it doesn't even have to be a verified complaint. It can even be just at the risk of calling it Marites reports. At the risk of calling it, but it's the most visual manggod makibata. Nanging storya si kuan nga ana ni-resign man to kay nahadlok nga kanang ihamang gibasted iyahang boss. So nahadlok siya nga kanang kontrahan, so ni-resign. So when you hear reports like that, even if you haven't verified it yet, or there's no one who makes an official statement, it's your duty to investigate so you can verify whether it is true or not. And the CODI, the committee to do that, has to be headed by a woman, or the committee chair. And then even if it's headed by a woman, it's not enough that it's headed by a woman. There has to be parity between men and women in the composition of the committee members. And so now we will go to Prescription.
So,
Okay, sige. Who likes to talk about prescription? Ano ang prescription? Resita na?
so lahi ni siya sa kanang
Medical
atong na gian or na kanang na like atong nadunggan permi nga medical nga resita because prescription mura ni siya ang time limit kung kanus ara ka maka-file ani nga kaso. So sa under sa Safe Spaces Act lahi ang iyang prescription because when there is a catcalling that's committed then you have to file a case within a year from the commission.
See, because if it's catcalling, so it's kinda mild, kinda mild in the sense nga murag it's just name calling, jeering. So if you don't file within the year, it's unreasonable for you to hold a grudge for 2 years, something like that. Diba?
Yes.
It's unreasonable for you to hold a grudge and a random comment or jeering beyond the
Period.
1 year period.
Kaya I
So,
think dapat pod na ang imong act is commensurate pod sa imong like penalty for example na imong i-serve. So and another anang punishable act under this law is like kanang groping or kanang
Groping,
for example
yes.
ma-apply ba ni nga law even in public utility vehicles. So
correct. And not only is it sexual harassment in public spaces. Oh yeah, we forgot public vehicles are also public spaces. And public vehicles don't just mean public jeepneys, public
Even Grab.
buses,
And
but even taxis and
Grab.
ride sharing or ride providing apps.
So, transport network vehicles
Transport
siya.
network vehicles like Grab, Uber,
Ang angkas,
Angkas.
ang wax.
Angkas. Oo. So, and then a lot of the groping sometimes happens, or the chancing could happen in the jeepneys and the buses. So kana kung groping,
ang
unsa
groping,
ang prescriptive
the
period?
prescriptive period is 10 years, attorney.
Okay.
So, mas taas-taas gud siya because the intensity of the act gud gitanaw pod sa
Naanay physical contact, naanay hands-on. Wait. What about the flashing?
flashing of private part, that's different. It has a different prescriptive period, attorney, because it prescribes in 5 years.
Okay. So kanang flashing, kanang magpakita
Magpakita
ba
lang.
sa private
Oo.
parts. However, acts that are cultural and acts that are natural are not included sa flashing. So if you go to the beach and wear a bikini, that's not flashing because people, when they go to the beach, ang na mag-long gown. Maligo man taog, dagat, mag-sunbathe man ta, or mag-breastfeed ko. Asus, common kay ni nako because I am notoriously a breastfeeder. Yun, baabot og pila ka tuig nga nag-breastfeed akong children ako niya. When you do that, if the kid is hungry, you have to feed. Sometimes the need to feed could happen while you're riding a bus, while you're at work. So you have to bare your breasts for your child. That's a legitimate act of a mother giving sustenance to her kid. That is not flashing. And if anybody makes you uncomfortable by jeering at you, like there was this one foreigner in a restaurant where bilib sa ko sa restaurant ato because ning duol ang foreigner sa isa ka mama nga nag-breastfeeding nga naingon nga, do you really have to show that? Ang foreigner mo'y gipa gawas. Ako gani ato kung ako mo'y mama basig siya mo'y nang harass a woman for doing a womanly function and making the woman feel uncomfortable na hinuon. Or acts of culture, like if I'm wearing my traditional tribal garb, sometimes it might show butt cheeks. Butt cheeks could be private parts, but that's my traditional garb. So dili butangan og mali siya. So dili na siya kanang flashing. What about online sexual harassment prescriptive period?
So this is the very interesting case kay under the law online sexual harassment does not prescribe, so imprescriptible gud siya.
Does not prescribe. So I could say something about somebody this year, and then this person might just bear it. But then after how many years, like say 20 years later, when she looks it up sa internet,
It's still
it's
there.
still there. So even if it's 20 or 30 or 40 years later, pwede
Pwede
pa
still
dyan
file a
mo
case. Oo.
file a case. Why? Because everything on the internet stays
In the
on
cloud.
the
Cloud.
internet. Okay, very quickly, kay, we only have a few minutes more to go. How about prescription for the traditional sexual harassment in schools, workplace, and training environments?
Attorney, in the old, not in the old, but in the Sexual Harassment Act, the prescriptive period was 3 years. But now in the Safe Spaces Act, they have extended it to 5 years from the commission of the violation.
And I think it makes sense because if you're having a college course now for 4 years, you might not want to sue your teacher while you're in college, which is just too much to handle because you're still studying. But you might want to sue after graduation. So the 5 years gives you that option. Okay, our time has really run out. Although I really love chatting with you, ladies. Thank you, everyone, for having us. A few last-minute messages from our guests.
Okay, so I'll start. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that after this talk, women and members of the LGBTQIA community feel more empowered because the law has given like safeguards for you.
For me, what I would want people to remember is that your right ends where another person's safe space begins. So I hope we cultivate everyone's safe space so people feel safer and people feel more free to express themselves.
Okay. So thank you everyone for listening. We hope that you were able to share our knowledge with regards to Safe Spaces Act and anti-sexual harassment law.
Thank you also to USC College of Laws for giving us very wonderful and very outspoken, opinionated, and empowered LSPs to guest here tonight. Thank you, everybody. God bless us all. Be safe.